My name is Carol Whitman. I am 67 years old, a widow, and until last summer I thought I had seen every kind of heartbreak life could deliver. But nothing prepared me for the message that appeared on my phone that afternoon at Clearwater Beach. I was sitting on a striped towel, my sandals half buried in the sand, watching my grandchildren splash in the surf. Their laughter carried on the warm breeze, mixing with the cries of gulls and the smell of sunscreen. I remember smiling at that simple joy until my phone buzzed. One line appeared on the screen: "Leave quietly, do not tell the kids, go to the car now." At first I thought it was spam or some kind of wrong number, but then a second line followed. "Your life and your house are in danger." My chest tightened. The Santa Fe house. Only family knew about that. A chill cut through the Florida heat as if someone had poured ice water down my back. I slipped my phone into my beach bag, forced my face to remain calm, and told the children I needed a little shade. My heart pounded, each step across the sand heavier than the last, because I sensed this was not a prank. It was the beginning of something I could not yet imagine. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand who I am, and why this message shook me to the core. My name is Carol Whitman, and for most of my life I was a school librarian. I loved books, the quiet hum of turning pages, and helping children discover the stories that would stay with them forever. For 41 years I was married to Bill Whitman, a steady man with kind eyes who believed in hard work and family. Together we built a life in Tampa Bay. We never had much money, but we had enough, and we always had each other. Our only son, David, was taken from us in a car accident when he was just 35. His son, Caleb, was 15 at the time, and after the funeral I promised myself I would step in the way Bill, and I had always stepped in for family. I raised Caleb as if he were my own. I paid for his schooling, his first car, even his apartment when he landed his first job. I thought he was my second chance at motherhood. After Bill passed last year, Caleb encouraged me to update my paperwork to make things easier down the road. I trusted him, because he was blood, and because I still saw that teenage boy grieving his father. That trust is what made the text at the beach feel like a knife in my chest. Someone was warning me that the person I loved most might not be who I thought he was. I walked slowly along the boardwalk, telling myself to breathe, trying to make sense of the warning on my phone. The sun was bright overhead, but inside I felt the heavy shadow of fear. My mind kept circling around one phrase in that second text. Your house. The Santa Fe house. That adobe home was sacred to me. Bill and I had restored it with our own hands. We had painted the clay walls, replaced the old wooden beams, and planted lavender in the garden. Nobody outside the family even knew how much it meant to us. Whoever sent that message knew more than they should. A third vibration pulled me back. This time the text said, Pelican Point Snacks, meet me now. I looked up and saw the small blue and white kiosk at the edge of the boardwalk, its awning flapping in the wind. My first instinct was to turn around and run to the car, but something inside me, maybe the teacher who had spent years telling children to look for the truth in books, pushed me forward. I walked to the kiosk and found a man waiting near the counter. He was in his mid-40s, plain khaki shirt, nervous eyes. He leaned toward me just enough to whisper, Miss Whitman. My name is Ethan Cole. I work at the same firm as your grandson Caleb. We need to talk, and we need to talk fast. Ethan's voice was low but urgent, the kind of tone that makes you lean in without thinking. He handed me a folded sheet of paper, the ink smudged as if it had been printed in a hurry. I should not be showing you this, he said, but if I stay silent I'll never forgive myself. On the page were fragments of emails, all with Caleb's name attached. Debt ledgers, odd transfers, notes to a man called Victor Ruiz. My stomach dropped as I read the amounts. Caleb owed more money than I could imagine, and the name Ruiz came with a nickname that chilled me. Hammer. Ethan explained that Ruiz was not a banker or a collection agency. He was the kind of man who breaks people before he takes their money. Ethan went on. He had seen Caleb sneaking into the office copy room, swapping out pages of documents late at night. He recognized one of the forms, a draft of my will. I'm almost certain he replaced part of it, Ethan said. There are new clauses about guardianship and cognitive decline, effective immediately. If you lose your footing, even for a moment, he gets control of everything. I felt my knees weaken, the boardwalk swaying beneath me. My grandson, the boy I had raised after his father's death, was planning to strip me of my home and my future. Ethan's final words were firm. Mrs. Whitman, you are in real danger. I shook my head, unable to let the words settle. Caleb, my Caleb, could not be capable of this. I remembered him as a little boy falling asleep in the back seat after baseball practice, his glove still on his hand. The thought that he might be plotting against me felt impossible. But Ethan did not waver. His eyes held mine as he spoke the words I least wanted to hear. Do not go back to your condo alone, he said. Check your medication. I believe your blood pressure pills have been tampered with. My hand flew to my purse where the bottle rested. For months I had felt a strange fog in my head, waves of dizziness I blamed on grief and age. Caleb's wife, Madison, was a pharmacy technician. She was always the one handing me tea at night, reminding me to take my pills. My mind began connecting dots I had never wanted to connect. I pulled the small bottle out, twisting it open with trembling fingers. The tablets looked slightly different than I remembered. Ethan lowered his voice again. It only takes a little at a time to make someone doubt their memory, to make others think they are losing control. I wanted to scream, to deny it, to run. Instead, I clutched my phone and whispered, "What do I do?" Ethan's answer was immediate. "We go to Ava Mercer, an elder law attorney downtown. She can protect you before it's too late." The drive to downtown Clearwater felt like moving through a dream. My thoughts spun in circles, but Ethan's calm voice kept pulling me back to focus. When we arrived at a small office tucked between a bakery and a travel agency, he led me upstairs to meet Ava Mercer. She was in her 50s, steady eyes behind simple glasses, the kind of person who seemed to notice everything at once. Within minutes she cleared her desk and listened as I poured out the whole story. Ava did not look shocked. She had seen cases like mine before. She explained the steps we needed to take: an emergency protective order to block any guardianship filings, a toxicology screen at urgent care to document what was in my system, and immediate instructions to freeze property transfers at the county clerk's office. She asked if I had the original will or at least copies. When I nodded, she told me to bring them the next morning. "Every page needs to be checked," she said. "Initials, seals, pagination. Forgeries are often sloppy if you know where to look." Her voice steadied me. For the first time since that beach text, I felt a sliver of ground under my feet. Before we left, Ava placed her hand over mine and gave one final instruction: "Do not contact Caleb or Madison. Silence, for now, is your shield." The next 24 hours moved like a blur of paperwork and waiting rooms. At urgent care, a nurse drew my blood and assured me results would be rushed. Later that evening, Ava called with the preliminary findings. The toxicology report showed traces of benzodiazepines, a sedative I had never been prescribed. The dosage was small but steady, enough to cause the fog and confusion I had been feeling. My heart sank. It was proof that something sinister had been happening inside my own kitchen. Meanwhile, Ava's forensic document specialist examined my will. I sat across the table as he placed 2 copies side by side under a bright lamp. The details were subtle but undeniable. The margins were uneven, the font slightly different, and 2 pages showed no faint imprint of my pen where I should have initialed. Someone had replaced sections of the original. The new language suggested that if I showed signs of cognitive decline, immediate control of my finances and properties would shift to Caleb Bishop. Ava took careful notes and began drafting motions to stay any guardianship petition Caleb might file. She also requested an independent neuropsychologist to evaluate my mental capacity, ensuring no one could argue I was incompetent. As the evidence stacked higher, the truth cut deeper. This was no misunderstanding, no moment of weakness. My grandson had turned my trust into a weapon. I returned to my bungalow the next morning with a police officer at my side, only to find the front door frame splintered and the alarm still shrieking. Inside, drawers were yanked open, papers scattered across the floor, and my small safe lay tipped on its side, the door pried halfway off. My hands shook as I stepped closer. The cash inside was untouched, but one thing was missing: a small thumb drive I had kept hidden under tax folders. That drive contained an offline password to a legacy savings account Bill had opened decades ago. The account was fully declared and modest by today's standards, but it still represented the careful discipline of his lifetime. I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone had been searching for it, and they had known exactly what to take. Within hours the bank called. An attempted login had been made from an unrecognized device. The system flagged it and demanded in-person verification with multiple forms of ID. 2-factor authentication blocked the access. For the moment the account was safe, but the message was clear. Whoever had entered my home would not stop until they stripped me of everything Bill and I had worked for. I stood in the wreckage of my living room, realizing this was no longer just about betrayal. It was about survival. That night I sat at Eduardo's small kitchen table, staring at my trembling hands. The police report was filed, the locks changed, but the hollow feeling in my chest remained. My grandson, the boy I had raised on Bill's shoulders at county fairs, was now orchestrating to erase me. It was more than I could process. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, call Nathan, and demand answers. Another part of me feared hearing his voice, slick and persuasive, weaving excuses that might soften my resolve. I had always been vulnerable to his charm. That's how manipulation works, it feeds on old love. As I wrestled with the storm inside me, Eduardo leaned forward. Carol, you can't let guilt confuse the truth. You gave him love. You gave him stability. What he does with that is his choice. His voice was calm, but his eyes held fire. I thought of all the times I'd scolded Nathan for skipping homework or lying about curfews. Back then the consequences were grounding or no allowance. Now the stakes were my home, my freedom, maybe my life. I felt torn between two identities, the grandmother who forgives and the woman who must fight for survival. That tornado of emotions spun so violently I could barely breathe. The next morning I woke to a pounding on Eduardo's apartment door. He checked the peephole, then waved me back with a serious look. 2 uniformed officers stood outside. When he opened the door, one of them asked, "Is Carol Whitman here?" My stomach sank. They explained Nathan had filed a petition claiming I was mentally unfit, citing erratic behavior and being manipulated by strangers. He painted himself as the concerned grandson, worried I was losing touch with reality. The words stung because they sounded so convincing, even though they were lies. The officer assured me this was standard procedure, but it meant I would soon face a formal evaluation. For a moment I felt the ground slip beneath me. If Nathan succeeded, I could lose legal control over my own life. My house, my savings, even my medical decisions could all end up in his hands. Eduardo placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "This is exactly why we gathered proof. We'll bring the toxicology reports, the altered documents, everything." His confidence gave me a thread to hold on to. Still, I couldn't ignore the bitter irony. The boy I had cradled through night terrors was now trying to declare me incompetent. It was the sharpest betrayal yet, and it pushed me past the line of hesitation. From that moment on, I vowed to fight not only with love, but with every ounce of strength I had left. 2 days later, I sat in a quiet medical office in downtown Chicago. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon polish. Across from me sat Dr. Elena Ross, a neurologist appointed by the court to evaluate my cognitive state. Her manner was kind but precise, every question deliberate. "Do you know today's date, Carol?" she asked. I answered without hesitation. "And can you recall 3 objects I'll list now?" I repeated them easily. The tests went on for nearly 2 hours, memory drills, logic puzzles, reflex checks. My nerves frayed, but I pushed through, determined not to let fear or fatigue cloud my answers. At the end, Dr. Ross set down her pen and studied me. "Mrs. Whitman, based on today's evaluation, you are fully competent. There are no signs of dementia or impairment." Relief washed over me like a warm tide. Then she lowered her voice. "However, your blood work revealed something troubling. Traces of benzodiazepine sedatives not prescribed to you are present. The levels suggest repeated exposure over several months. Someone has been drugging you." The words landed like a thunderclap. My suspicions weren't paranoia, they were fact. Nathan had been slowly poisoning me under the guise of caring for my health. I left the office shaken, but with fresh determination. The medical proof wasn't just a shield against his lies. It was a weapon I could finally use to fight back. The following morning, Eduardo and I met with attorney Michael Grant, a seasoned elder law specialist with silver hair and sharp eyes. His office smelled faintly of leather and old books, a place where battles had been fought and won on paper. I handed him Dr. Ross's report along with the lab results. He read silently, nodding grimly as each page confirmed what we already knew. "This," he said, tapping the stack of documents, "changes everything. Nathan's petition to declare you incompetent collapses under the weight of this evidence. More than that, we can now file criminal charges, fraud, forgery, and attempted poisoning." Hearing the words spoken aloud made my throat tighten. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was legal truth. Still, the idea of seeing my grandson in handcuffs twisted my stomach. Grant must have seen the hesitation in my eyes. "Carol, this isn't about vengeance. It's about protection, yours and others. If Nathan is capable of this with you, he won't stop. He'll do it to someone else." Eduardo leaned forward. "He already tried once. He'll try again." I sat back in the chair, my pulse steadying. For months I had been the prey, cornered and afraid. Now, with evidence, law, and allies beside me, the balance of power was shifting. For the first time, I felt the possibility of victory. That evening, Eduardo insisted I stay at his friend's cabin outside the city. It was a quiet place tucked behind rows of pine trees, with a screened porch and a wood-burning stove. For the first time in weeks, I thought I might sleep without fear, but peace never lasts long when betrayal runs this deep. Around midnight, the crunch of tires on gravel jolted us awake. Eduardo peered through the blinds. A familiar car idled at the edge of the property. Nathan's. My chest tightened. How had he found us? The only explanation was that he'd been following. Eduardo reached for his phone to call the police, but before he could, headlights cut off and the sound of a car door slammed. Moments later, Nathan's voice echoed through the darkness. "Grandma, I just want to talk. Please, come outside." The words were deceptively calm, but the tension in his tone sent chills down my spine. Eduardo shook his head firmly, mouthing, "Stay quiet." Still, my heart ached hearing that word "grandma" spoken with the same boyish inflection I remembered from years past. It almost pulled me toward the door. But then I remembered the altered will, the drugs, the home invasion. The love I once trusted had been weaponized against me. This wasn't a child calling for comfort. This was a desperate man closing in. And if I made the wrong move, it could be my last. Eduardo kept his hand on my arm as we crouched in the dim light of the cabin. My heart pounded so loudly I feared Nathan could hear it through the walls. He called again, his voice sharper this time. "Grandma, if you don't come out, I'll have to come in. You know I just want to protect you." Protect me. The word curdled in my stomach. That was the same phrase he'd used when convincing me to update my will, the same excuse for bringing me tea laced with sedatives. Every syllable was now poison. Eduardo whispered, "Police are 10 minutes away. We just have to hold." His calm steadied me, but Nathan's footsteps crunching closer to the porch set my nerves on fire. The wooden boards creaked under his weight as he tried the door handle. It rattled, locked. "I don't make this harder than it has to be," he shouted, the mask of civility gone. The boy I had loved, the man I had trusted, was no longer standing outside. In his place was someone cornered by debt, desperation, and darkness. For the first time since this nightmare began, fear gave way to anger. My life was not his bargaining chip. My voice cracked through the cabin walls, louder than I expected. "Nathan, stop. This ends tonight." Red and blue lights flashed through the pine trees, washing the cabin walls in color. Nathan froze on the porch as the sound of car doors slamming filled the night. "Police. Step away from the door." An officer's voice boomed. For a second, I thought he might run, but instead he lifted his hands slowly, eyes darting like a trapped animal. 2 officers approached, guns drawn but steady. "On your knees," one commanded. Nathan hesitated, his chest heaving, before sinking down onto the wooden boards. The sight pierced my heart. This was my grandson, the boy who once begged me for bedtime stories, now kneeling in handcuffs beneath the sweep of a flashlight. Madison emerged from the shadows near the car, clutching a small bag. Inside, police later found pill bottles, forged documents, and a prepaid phone, evidence of how deep the plan had gone. She didn't resist when they cuffed her, only lowered her head in silence. I stood in the doorway, Eduardo's steady hand at my back. The night air was sharp with pine and sirens, and I knew there was no going back. Love and loyalty had been tested, broken, and finally exposed under the harsh lights of justice. As Nathan was led away, he glanced at me, his eyes full of something between rage and regret. I whispered only one word, "Enough." The cabin grew quiet once the patrol cars disappeared down the gravel road. I stood on the porch, staring at the dark gap between the trees where Nathan's car had been. The silence pressed heavy on my chest. I thought of Bill, of our years building a life rooted in trust and honesty, and wondered what he would say if he had witnessed tonight. Perhaps he would remind me that love cannot erase accountability. In the weeks that followed, charges were filed: fraud, forgery, attempted poisoning. The evidence was overwhelming. Madison admitted her part, and Nathan, facing the weight of his choices, finally broke. His plea deal meant prison, but also counseling and treatment for the gambling addiction that had driven him to desperation. It was not the future I had wanted for him, but it was the only path left. For me, healing meant something different. I worked with attorney Grant and Eduardo to create the Bill Whitman Foundation, a program to educate seniors about financial abuse and to support families battling addiction. Our adobe home in Santa Fe, once nearly stolen, became a retreat for people seeking new beginnings. Standing in that desert light months later, I felt both grief and strength. My story was painful, but if sharing it could protect another grandparent, then perhaps no part of it was wasted. If you have stayed with me until the end, I want you to hear this clearly. What happened to me is not just my story. It is a warning and, I hope, a source of strength for others. Families can be places of comfort, but they can also be places where trust is misused. I ignored the red flags because I wanted to believe the best about Nathan. I told myself his concern for my health was love, his insistence on handling paperwork was kindness. In reality, those were signs of control I should have questioned sooner. Please, do not wait until a crisis forces you to act. Talk with someone you trust about your legal documents. Keep a close watch on your medications. Make sure your financial accounts have protections that cannot be bypassed. These are not acts of mistrust. They are acts of self-respect. And if you are on the other side, if you feel yourself drowning in debt or addiction, know this: hurting the people who love you will never free you. The only way forward is honesty and help. If my story moved you, please tap the like button so it can reach another grandparent or parent who needs to hear it. Share it with a friend who might be at risk. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what boundary you will set this week. Your story matters, and your voice might just save someone else.